Hey everyone! Tonight we're starting with something special and quiet, the lives of prehistoric women. The ones who, while the men were out hunting mammoths, comparing whose spears were bigger, or occasionally falling into holes they didn't expect, were back home, doing all sorts of other things. So, before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love to see who's here and when. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for a gentle hum, and let's go on this journey together tonight. You are a prehistoric woman, and it's morning. Or so you think. You don't have a watch, you don't even have the sun yet, because the fire went out sometime during the night, and now the cave is so dark you can't tell your hand from the nearest rock. Your back hurts, your neck hurts. Something inside your shoulder rattles when you try to stretch, and you're not sure if it's a muscle or a warning. Either way, you'll deal with it later. Right now, you're waking up in your first studio apartment ever. It's cramped, not because you like it, but because there's nowhere else to go. Next to you, there's a toddler, still fast asleep but somehow managing to wedge a sticky paw into your cheek and a filthy hand into your armpit. On the other side, your friend is curled up in the ashes of last night's fire, panting like a bear that's decided hibernation is a year-round event. He hasn't bothered to light a fire. Apparently that's your problem. You stir, trying not to wake anyone, but of course you do. A child sits up and mumbles in the cave that they're hungry. You respond with the prehistoric equivalent of "go lick the roots," but that doesn't work. It never does. Now you're officially awake, with your brain as raw as a piece of burnt wood. Your bed, if you can call it that, is made of old furs, dried grass, and small, unidentifiable sharp objects. There's no pillow, just a rock that was soft enough in your previous life but has become one with your spine. You've slept like this for years, and every morning you wake up thinking that maybe tonight you'll find a better one. But you never do. Above you, the ceiling flickers, etched with time and soot, and the echoes of too many people breathing in too small a space. Someone's child cries on the other side of the cave. Someone is coughing, a low wheeze that makes you wonder if it's just a morning cold or the start of something worse. You listen for a moment, then decide it's not your problem, not yet. You take a quick count, making sure no one's wandering around in the middle of the night. Children have a habit of that, especially in the Paleolithic era, when the slightest distraction was often fatal. No one's missing, except for the eldest, who you suspect has gone out to poke something with a stick that absolutely shouldn't be poked. You reach for the woven baby wrap, but of course it's underneath the baby. The baby is somehow sleeping on its side now, heavier than yesterday. Still, you gently pull the wrap off, hoping not to disturb it. The baby grumbles, shifts, but stays asleep. It's the best thing that's happened to you all morning. There is no such thing as getting up slowly in your world. As soon as your feet hit the ground, you are officially in charge of everything that matters. Fire, food, safety, warmth, and figuring out why one of the kids is now naked and sprinting toward the stream. You sigh, but you don't panic. This is normal, every morning. Meanwhile, your partner rolls over, scratches something very personal, and mumbles something about hunting later. Yes, of course he will. Later. But first, he will stay where he is, like a fur-covered rock, dreaming of mammoths he probably won't catch. This is how your day starts. Not with birdsong or soft footsteps by the window because you don't have a window. Or birds. At least, not the pleasant kind. Your mornings are cold, crowded, and full of responsibilities. And yet you wake up. You always wake up. Because in the Paleolithic world, survival wasn't something you scheduled after coffee. It was something you started the moment you opened your eyes. Anthropologists are still debating whether primitive humans slept better than we do. Some say the natural rhythms of the sun and moon created healthier sleep cycles. Others point out that sharing a bed with children, smoke, fleas, and the occasional bone might not be a recipe for perfect sleep. You tend to agree with the latter. As you crouch by the ashes of last night's fire, you glance up at the cave walls. There, looming in the dim light, are drawings that someone made long ago. Maybe it was you. Maybe it was someone before you. Stick figures with spears, animals with too many legs, handprints in the stone like signatures, a reminder of who you are, where you came from, and what you came here to do. You exhale slowly, the cold air surrounding your breath like smoke. The fire is out, the day has begun, and no matter how much your back aches or how heavy the baby is, you already know the truth. No one else will do this for you. So you reach out, something cracks again. Maybe your joints, maybe the floor. Either way, you're here. And today, your day has just begun. The first thing to do is build a fire. Always build a fire. Fire is the beating heart of cave life, and unfortunately, that heart stops beating at night. Keeping it alive is your responsibility, not because you volunteered, but because no one else seems particularly motivated. Your partner, for example, is still snoring in the cold ashes, wrapped in his fur coat like a prehistoric burrito. He'll wake up later, stretch dramatically, and talk about going hunting, but for now, the fire is your problem. Again. You crawl toward the hearth, which is really just a circle of scorched rocks and dark regrets, and sigh. Building a fire sounds fancy in theory, but in practice, you mostly just squat, groan, and try not to curse so loudly that you wake the baby. Your knees crack as you bend down, and you reach for your tools, a few sticks, some dry grass, and the iron will of a woman who knows that if she doesn't do it right, people will be cranky and cold and blaming her by midday. Historians still debate how humans first learned to control fire. Was it a lightning strike that saved someone's life? Did someone accidentally invent barbecue by placing meat near a volcano? No one knows for sure. What you do know is that, at this point, fire feels less like an invention and more like a grueling daily chore. There's no flint, no lighter, no matches, just friction and hope. You begin rubbing the sticks together, gently at first, then faster, the way you've done it hundreds of times before. Your hands are calloused, your fingers rough from years of performing this ritual. Sparks rarely appear, but smoke always rises. A toddler comes to watch, probably thinking it's some kind of magic trick. You'll explain that it's not, but you're too busy trying to summon flames from a pile of grass like a nervous magician to hear the applause of the audience. Finally, a small puff of smoke curls up. You bend down, blowing gently, careful not to spit and ruin the cave. Someone sneezes right behind you, and for a moment the smoke wavers. You resist the urge to throw a rock. Breathe deeply. Concentrate. A flicker of orange, the smallest flame. It's fragile as a baby bird and easily snuffed out. You cover it with your hand, add more grass, whisper to the universe that this time you'll keep it alive. You swear. The fire starts to burn, spread, and crackle, sending a warm light dancing on the cave walls. A child claps. Another immediately tries to poke the fire with a stick, because of course they will. You stop them in time, mumbling something about the consequences, but you're too tired to finish. The fire flares up again, and that's what matters. In the Paleolithic world, fire was more than warmth, it was survival. It kept wild animals away, boiled water into drinkable water, boiled roots until they were less poisonous, and made the darkness less like a bottomless pit threatening to swallow you whole. Without fire, your cave wouldn't be a home, it would be a cold, damp hole in the rock. Anthropologists still debate whether men or women were primarily responsible for keeping the fires going. Some believe women assumed this role because they stayed close to the hearth while the men went hunting. Others believe it was a shared task, passed between those closest to them when the embers began to die down. But you don't have time for debate. You just know that if this fire goes out, no one will volunteer to rekindle it but you. You slowly add wood, stack rocks, rearrange it for cooking later. You knew you were going to get burned at some point today. You always do. Probably on the same log you burned yourself on yesterday, because life just repeats itself. The kids gather around, fascinated by the fire. They're like moths drawn to the light, plotting to create chaos in their little minds. You watch them closely, ready to grab someone's fur if they get too close. Fire is enchanting, but dangerous. Like parenting, but hotter. If it rains today, you'll cry. If someone kicks dirt into the fire, you'll seriously consider throwing a stick at them. And if the predators come back empty-handed, well, that's why you have soup sticks. Soup sticks are used to stir water and twigs until it technically counts as dinner. It's not delicious, but it's better than starving. Because the truth is in your world. If the fire goes out, Everything dies. The plants you pick are not tasty when they are raw. Meat, if you have any, is safer when it is cooked. Even the air is less stuffy when smoke curls up to the ceiling. Fire is warmth, fire is life, and you are its keeper. As you sit down, watching the fire grow more intense, you let out a slow breath. Your hands ache, your knees ache. But you did it again. You kept the magic going for another day. Of course, no one will thank you. They just hope the fire is there, the way people always hope for miracles they don't understand. A child tugs at your fur blanket and asks when breakfast will come. You smile awkwardly and point to the cave entrance. First, you say, "We need to find it." You emerge from the cave with your wicker basket over your shoulder, and the baby slung over your other hip like a particularly squeaky piece of luggage. The morning air is cool and damp, smelling faintly of smoke and wet moss. The light is gray and soft, as if the sky is still trying to remember how to live during the day. Somewhere in the trees, something large is growling, hopefully something else. You don't have time to care. You're out foraging. Breakfast doesn't come from the pantry. It comes from walking, crouching, sniffing, and occasionally praying that whatever you've picked won't cause hallucinations, diarrhea, or death. Today, like any other day, your choices include a tuber that smells like feet but cooks into something like food, some greens that you're pretty sure aren't poisonous, and the occasional mushroom that you'll try again even though it made Cousin Thog sing to the tree for 6 hours last time. You head toward a thicket near the stream where you once found a clump of wild onions. Your feet sink into the mud, and the kid sitting on your hip starts making noises of protest, but you ignore them. Every move seems carefully calculated. Step here. Duck under that branch. Don't step on the stick-like snake. Don't grab the stick-like snake. This isn't shopping. This is survival disguised as an outdoor activity. You reach the first bush and look for berries. Not the red ones, not after what happened. You carefully pick it, checking for ripeness, smelling for any sourness. The child suddenly leans forward and grabs a handful of something that isn't food. You gently pry it away and throw its discovery a slug into the bushes. It squeals in protest, attracting the attention of a bird that looks angry for some reason. You shoo it away with a stick. Anthropologists still debate when humans stopped foraging and started farming. Some argue that it was women who delayed farming, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to spend the rest of their lives weeding the fields. And honestly, you get the idea. Foraging, with all its dangers and uncertainties, offers something agriculture never did: the possibility of variety, of fleetingness, of fragility. Today you find a few promising tubers, some bitter greens, and a slightly overripe or slightly fermented fruit. You shrug and stuff it in your basket. If it smells worse later, you feed it to your dog. If it smells better, you feed it to your mate and call it dessert. You're always alert as you work. Foraging is not a solitary sport. You listen closely. Birdsong, twigs snapping, the wind suddenly changing direction. A predator could appear at any moment. A wolf, a bear, another member of the tribe with bad intentions, or worse, a child you didn't realize was watching you. You glance around and count. 1 on your hip, 2 probably in the den, hopefully not eating insects or wood. Probably eating. You sigh and refocus. You return to the cave, your pack laden with roots and leaves and hope. The weight of the toddler shifts and your hips protest. You adjust your grip, ignoring the dull ache in your back. It's always there. You don't remember what it's like to not be in pain somewhere. When you arrive, the fire is still burning, a small blessing. The older kids are arguing over who gets to hold the shiny rock, which is both unshiny and useless. You guide them with the skill of someone who has handled many kidnapping situations involving frogs. You return to the cave. It's time to cook. You place the potato near the fire and reach for your favorite rock. Not because it's special, but because it's the least likely to crack. You begin pounding the potato into a paste, adding herbs, stirring with the same stick you use for everything else. No tools, no recipe, just instinct and trial by fire, sometimes literally. The child sitting next to you starts chewing on your hair. You gently pry the hair out of his mouth and offer him a piece of green. He puts it down immediately. You consider doing the same. The food begins to heat up. It smells edible. It's delicious. You portion out small portions into the bowl of bark, still warm from the fire. Everyone eats with their hands. One child discovers a bug in his bowl and looks at you in horror. You raise an eyebrow and say the only thing that makes sense, it's protein. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is served. You sit down, knees cracking again, and watch your family chew quietly. For a brief moment, peace reigns. No one cries, no one runs, no one throws things. The child sighs and drools gently on your shoulder. And then, of course, someone drops their bowl and asks for more. You smile, a smile that is half tired, half defiant, and say, "Let's go find something to eat, because breakfast is ready, and the day has just begun." If you think modern parenting is exhausting, try raising 3 kids in a cave with no doors, no walls, no playrooms. You're not just a mom, you're a full-time nurse, security guard, referee, chef, and sanitation technician, all in a fur-wrapped pajama set. And unlike today's world, there are no cribs, no screen time, no babysitter named Alexa. Your only child protection strategy is your own voice and your eyebrows. If those don't work, you start making up wolf-related threats. Of course, the kids have endless energy. The youngest is still nursing and clinging to your hip, the middle one is trying to eat a beetle it found under a rock, and the oldest has disappeared completely. Again, you cup your hands and call out their names, listening for a giggle or the more familiar scream of someone who has discovered a wasp nest the hard way. A distant cry answers you, yes. You sigh and toss the mixing wand aside. Whatever you're doing can wait, because your child is out there somewhere, sticky, screaming, and probably covered in stings. You lift your child higher on your hip and walk barefoot through the undergrowth, rehearsing a stern lecture on personal choice and natural consequences as you go. Historians still debate how early humans managed childcare without a structured system. Some believe it was communal, everyone sharing the care of small children. Others believe mothers shouldered much of the burden, often juggling multiple children while also helping to gather food and keep fires going. You know where you stand on this. The word help here is more theoretical than practical. You find your oldest child standing in the bushes, crying and waving a stick at nothing. The bees are gone, but the problem is still there. You check for stings. There are none. Just panic. You wipe his face with the edge of your towel, say something comforting, and give him a piece of bark to distract him. It works for now. You herd them all back into the cave like sheep giving their opinions. Inside, chaos has begun to simmer. The youngest is chewing on a charred stick from the fire. The middle one is wearing a squirrel tail hat. Your friend is nowhere to be seen, probably practicing throwing spears into the clouds. You kneel down and begin grinding the roots into powder with a flat stone, shaking it back and forth with steady force. The child is still clinging to you, one hand tangled in your hair. You can't remember the last time you ate without someone touching your face. You glance at the cave entrance, where the sunlight slants through in pale beams. For a moment, an eerie silence falls, complete silence. It's beautiful, peaceful, scary. Because silence means one thing: trouble. You jump to your feet and see the middle one stacking rocks dangerously close to the fire. You intervene just in time to prevent your second memorable disaster involving singed eyebrows. You use a broken bowl and a few pebbles to distract it, hoping it won't try to eat it. But it doesn't. Instead, it throws them at its sibling. Discipline is an art. You have only 2 tools: your voice and your eyes. If those don't work, you resort to the ultimate motherly phrase, passed down since the beginning of time. Put that down, or I swear I'll feed you to the wolves. Of course, it's not a real threat, mostly, but they get the message. Despite the chaos, you're amazed at their endurance. These little people, half covered in dirt and half covered in suspicious slime, are learning. They're watching you, how you keep the fire going, how you avoid snakes, how you turn bark into soup. Every grumble of instruction, every hand gesture, every disapproving look is a lesson. You are their teacher, their guide, their survival model. The children follow you everywhere, even to the stream, where you wash beetle guts off your hands. They wade knee-deep in water, splash each other, laugh, and then immediately start arguing about who owns which puddle. You break up the argument by pretending to see a fish, distracting them long enough for you to wash the goo off your elbows. On the way home, the child falls asleep halfway, head down, mouth open, one hand still clutching a stick, You adjust the swaddling clothes, wrap him up tight, and keep walking. Your legs are strong, trained by years of walking, squatting, bending. You have carried children, baskets, firewood, sometimes all three at once. You no longer think about it. It's just what your body does. When you turn around, the fire is still burning. Thankfully, you sit down for a moment, the baby snoring against your chest, and let yourself rest. Not for long, someone will need something soon, but for now, just this moment. And even as your back aches, your hair is tangled, and your hands itch with 1,000 cuts, you feel something else. Gratitude. Because these little, wild, dirty, perfect people are still alive, still growing, still yours. You dust yourself off, pick up the root powder, and start stirring again. Dinner won't come, and no one else can keep them from the fire. You'd think that, after keeping the fire burning, foraging with a baby on your hip, and stopping other kids from inventing new ways to hurt themselves, someone would say thank you. But they don't. What they say is, why does it smell like something's dead? A meaningful thing to say, considering the whole cave smells of wet fur, old smoke, and broken dreams. Cleaning, as a concept, is pretty vague in the Paleolithic world. You don't have a mop. You don't have soap. You have a bundle of twigs tied together with sinew and resignation. You sweep the cave floor, not because it helps, but because it's the only thing that keeps you from screaming into the abyss. Clouds of dust rise like ancient ghosts. Ash drifts in gentle swirls. Someone walks straight through the freshly swept dirt, dragging a stick, and something falls out of their nose. You close your eyes and breathe. Washing was torture. It involved dragging stiff, bloody animal skins to streams, rubbing them against rocks in the hope that nothing would bite you midway. You had no detergent, just sand, cold water, and muscles hardened by carrying wet fur uphill. The water was always freezing. The skins were heavy. You swung them around with practiced swings, wincing as your wrists jerked back. There's a reason prehistoric art doesn't show washing. It's too traumatic. And don't mention garbage. There were no toilets. They were over there, meaning far enough from the caves to not stink, but not so far that small children would be eaten along the way. If someone forgot this sacred boundary and left a surprise near the sleeping area, you dealt with it the way you deal with most interpersonal conflicts, with angry gestures and threats of a pointed stick. Scholars debate whether prehistoric humans had any understanding of hygiene. Some believe that instinct and experience taught them to keep their surroundings clean to avoid disease. Others say it was all conjecture and fear. You don't need a degree to know this when someone's corner starts to smell musty. You move your sleeping mat 10 feet to the left and burn some herbs just in case. You don't clean for comfort. You clean for survival. The difference is important. Of course, the kids aren't helpful. They track in the mud, throw away bones, and hide dead insects in bundles of fur for later. Once you found a frog in your water bottle, the middle child said it was a gift. You almost cried. Not out of fear, just because you were tired of explaining that frogs weren't gadgets. You reorganized the pantry, which was just a shady corner where the ants hadn't completely taken over. You checked your stockpile of dried roots, crushed berries, and vaguely edible grubs. The berries were smaller than you expected. Maybe a squirrel had attacked, or your cousin. Both were equally destructive. And then came the washing. You scraped the remaining bark out of the bowl with your fingers, rinsed it in the stream, and gave it to the cleanest-looking kid. They lick. It's the cleaning system. You pretend not to notice, because if you stare at the details for too long, you'll never eat again. No shelves, just rocks. No cabinets, just cracks. If you're lucky, nothing crawls out of your food storage while you're cooking. If you're unlucky, you get a little more protein than you intended. Sanitation is a community issue. If one person neglects it, everyone suffers. There's no hand sanitizer, no hot water. But there are expectations. If someone's bedding starts to smell like rotting moose, you say something, or you burn something, depending on your mood. No one compliments you, though. No one says, "Oh, the cave floor looks great today." But if you neglect cleaning for even one day, suddenly everyone is criticizing you. Why are there hairs in the stew who put mud on the birthing mat? The water tastes like squirrels again. And yet you do it anyway, because someone has to. Because it's better than letting things rot. Because you know what happens when disease strikes. You've seen people collapse suddenly. Their eyes glaze over before you can even touch them. You've buried children. You've dug graves with your bare hands. You clean because you know what's at stake. Your hands are chapped. Your nails are black with dirt. Your back is hunched like someone who's done this every day for years. But the cave is, if not clean, at least habitable. The fire burns, the children breathe, and the stench has faded to something more neutral, like old smoke and sweaty feet. You step back, look around, and nod. It's not perfect, it's not even good, but enough to keep people alive. And in this world, it's the cleanest thing possible. Dinner begins, as usual, with a question, what can you cook before it spoils, escapes, or poisons someone? It's a daily culinary challenge. No menu, no seasonings, no second chances, just roots, fire, and a very low standard for what's considered edible. You start by sorting through what you have. A few tubers from the morning's foraging, a piece of meat from a recent half-hearted hunt, now a little worn but still smelling more like meat than regret. There's some greens that may or may not still be crisp, and a mushroom that you're about 70% sure isn't a death cap, most likely. The fire's burning strong. Thank you, and the rocks around it are hot. You place a flat stone on top as a cooking surface. It's not exactly non-stick, but you've learned to tilt it so things don't roll off and fall into the coals. Usually, your cooking tools. A stick, a rock, and your bare hands. You crush the root with the rock, scrape off the skin for extra flavor, and wrap the meat in leaves, not to taste, to survive. Wrapping the meat helps it cook evenly and keeps it from turning into a charcoal sculpture, which happened last week. No one says anything about that. The kids surround you like wolves, eyes glued to the cooking food, noses twitching at the smell. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's familiar. Smoke, bitter, slightly charred. One of them pokes the meat with a stick and asks if it's done. You growl in response, because you're one burned finger away from biting it. Finally, your friend returns, holding a squirrel and telling a story about how it almost escaped. He hands it to you like it's a prize. You nod politely, add it to the pile, and mentally calculate whether or not to boil it. No, but the kids cheered anyway, because meat is meat, even if it's mostly bones and fluff. Anthropologists often debate when early humans began cooking on purpose. Was it a necessity to roast on fire, or did someone look at a raw root and say, this might be less horrible if I boiled it in an animal's stomach? Either way, you're continuing that ancient experiment, each stew a little more questionable. You try boiling a handful of greens in a bag made from a goat's stomach. It bubbles slightly and smells like ambition and regret. The bag leaks a little, but it holds long enough to warm the insides. You add a few roots, a piece of squirrel meat, and one of the mysterious gifts the kids found, maybe a mushroom. Probably safe. Dinner is served without ceremony. No plates, no garnishes. You scoop portions into a bowl of bark, or just hand it to someone if they seem too eager. People eat with their hands, tearing, slurping, smacking. If someone drops food on the ground, they blow on it and keep eating. Cleaning up was over an hour ago. Someone chokes. You ignore it. Someone says it tastes like feet. You glare. Someone asks for more, and you wonder if their taste buds are damaged or they're just too hungry to care. Cooking, for you, isn't about impressing anyone. It's about making sure no one starves tonight. You're not a chef. You're an alchemist with low standards and high risks. If it's warm, if it doesn't bite back, and if it stays in their stomach, it's a win. Your friend, now stuffed with self-satisfaction, leans back and begins to tell an embellished tale of his hunt. Something about cliffs, wind, and near death involving a snake. You nod and smile as you scrape the charred crust off the rock. You've heard better stories from the kids. The kids, clammy and sleepy, begin to slow down. One is chewing on a bone, another is sleeping, head resting on your lap. The little one is drooling on a squirrel pelt. The fire crackles, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. You look down at your hands, calloused, stained, blistered, and think of the other women you knew, the ones who cooked over fires for years, the ones who taught you how to tell good roots from bad, how to boil in a bag, how to keep meat fresh a day longer than you wanted. This is their legacy, and now it's yours. Historians sometimes debate whether early human meals were communal events. Some say tribes gathered around communal fires. Others say food was hoarded, eaten in secret, or traded for favors. You don't have time for theories. You have to stir the stew. You give the last spoonful to the child who has been quiet all evening. They blink, nod, and eat in silence. You watch them chew, your heart clenching with something you can't name. And as they look up at you with tired, grateful eyes, you realize something rare has happened. They liked it. You cooked dinner on the ground with wood, fire, and a random prayer to someone, and they liked it. You smile, just a little. As dusk falls and the fire crackles, crackling steadily, the children slow down. The chaos subsides, not completely, but enough to make room for something else. This is when the women gather, not because it's tradition, not because someone told them to, but because after a day of foraging, chasing, crushing, scolding, carrying, cleaning, and cooking, the only thing that keeps you sane is the company of someone equally exhausted. The circle forms slowly, as it always does. At first, no one sits too close. You sit on a flat rock, your back still arched from the day's work, the baby wrapped in a towel to your chest, finally falling asleep and drooling softly down your collarbone. To your left, a woman with ash on her cheek untangles a knotted net. To your right, another person carefully strips the bark into strips, the rhythm soft and familiar. Someone hands you a bag of fermented berry juice. You take a sip. It tastes sour like promises and regrets, but it warms your belly, and that's enough. The conversation begins with practical questions: which berries are rotting? How much skin is left before winter? Which child wandered too close to the saber-toothed dragon's lair yesterday? Everyone nods solemnly. No one says the child's name aloud, not yet. Then comes lighter stories. Someone laughs about her mate tripping over a root and dropping a whole rabbit into the fire. Another woman rolls her eyes and imitates the husky boasting of a man telling of an unfinished hunt. You laugh, not a big laugh, but enough to loosen something in your chest. There's always a subtle competition. Someone brings out a basket she's just finished knitting. It's beautiful, tight, symmetrical, not a single thread out of place. You glance down at your basket, frayed and patched at 3 corners, and make a note to bring the best one next time. Someone else has kept her baby's hair clean. Suspicious. But the judgment is gentle, quiet, because the truth is, you need each other. You trade everything: shells for herbs, roots for furs, dried fish for a few sharp stones. You talk without saying anything: raised eyebrows, shrugged shoulders, mumbled approval. No one takes notes, but somehow everything important is remembered. Who's about to give birth? Who needs help burying someone? Who's out of bark bowls? Anthropologists debate how much power women held in prehistoric communities. Were they just sidekicks, quietly cooking and cleaning while men made the big decisions? Or were they the real organizers, the diplomats, the traders, the balance keepers? Looking at this circle, you know what you believe. You remember the time your child had a persistent fever. It was one of these women who brought you scraps of bark and sat by your side all night. You remember pulling your mate out of a hole he fell into, trying to impress another tribe. These women don't mock you. They help. They always do. No one is in charge. But everyone knows who listens best. The older woman on the other side of the circle, her face carved from wind and fire, is quiet. But when she does, everyone leans toward her. Her words are few, but they carry weight. You hope your voice will carry as far as that one day. Not loud, just necessary. One of the younger women, newly paired, asks if she should worry that her mate hasn't returned from hunting. There's a moment of silence. Then someone snorts and says, "If he's dead, he'll be quieter than usual." The group chuckled, not maliciously, but because laughter is sometimes the only thing between panic and peace. The fire flared gently. Sparks danced in the darkness like tiny messengers. The sky outside the cave had turned from gray to indigo, a deep blue that swallowed up all thought if you stared too long. You listened to the rhythm of the women's voices, the soft murmur of a common language, the soft sound of knitting, the rustle of dry leaves under someone's feet. This wasn't idleness. This was survival, emotional sustenance, social glue. You came here to be reminded that you weren't the only one carrying it all. A stray child came, languid and weak, and fell into your arms. You kept talking. You just adapted. The child curls into a ball of soft limbs and sticky fingers, and you listen as someone describes a new way to smoke fish with pine needles. You file that advice away in a part of your brain reserved for later, the same part that remembers which rocks are sharpest, which leaves soothe burns, and who still owes you a handful of dandelion roots. No one says it, but the moment is sacred, not in the ritual sense, in the real sense, the kind of sacredness that happens when people who know each other sit down and stop pretending they're not tired. You stretch your legs, the child stirs, you soothe it with one hand, listening and watching the shadows dance on the cave wall in the distance. Someone says it might rain tomorrow. Another groans at the thought of wearing a wet fur coat. Everyone nods. Then the circle slowly falls apart. The older women stand first, their joints rattling like branches in the wind. You follow, gathering your things, slinging your basket over your shoulder, the baby still pressed to your chest. You exchange a few grunts, a nod, a tired smile. No one says goodbye. You don't have to. You'll come back tomorrow. There's a quiet heaviness to the healing process when you're left with nothing but bark and bones and blind hope. And yet, when someone in the tribe bleeds, coughs, or goes quiet, they come to you, not because you have a degree, you don't even know the word for doctor, but you've patched more skin than anyone, delivered more babies, and seen more fevers break or not break than anyone really cares to. It started early this morning. A child had a rash that spread across his arms, blotchy and red. His mother came panting to the cave entrance, the boy wrapped in fur, whimpering in a way that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd been scratched, but it might be the first time he couldn't ignore it. You held him close, feeling the warmth rise from his skin, and began your routine. First, you opened the little medicine bag tied to your waist, a bundle of bark, dried leaves, crushed mushrooms, and a bit of the strong-smelling root that your mate used to talk to trees for 2 hours. You crush a few leaves between your fingers, sniff carefully, and quickly make a paste with water heated near a fire. Anthropologists have found traces of medicinal herbs in ancient burial mounds, suggesting that people knew how to heal long before recorded history. Whether your technique comes from instinct, experience, or some elder who insisted that moss can cure anything, you've learned what works best. And when that doesn't work, you prepare herbs that help relieve pain. Because even in the Paleolithic world, comfort was still valued. You rub the mixture on the child's skin. It grimaces but doesn't cry. You mumble something you can't quite understand, half memory, half comfort. The mother watches, biting her knuckles. You nod at her, and she lets out a breath, just a little. Next, a limper comes in with a cut on his leg, a sharp rock while foraging. You wash it with boiling water, then sew it up with gut thread and a bone needle, your fingers moving quickly, decisively. No alcohol, no anesthesia, just a stick to bite on and a few fermented berries if they're lucky. They grit their teeth and hold your arm as you pull the thread tight. They'll call you a miracle worker afterward, or they'll mumble about the stitch going awry. Either way, they'll be back. There is always a next time. You have helped birth more children than you can count. Some were born in silence, some in screams, some not at all. Childbirth in your world means crouching in a corner, surrounded by women singing soft songs, blood seeping into the fur beneath, and you, steady hand, calm voice, guiding the life into a place that is not always welcoming. When it ends in a healthy cry, the mother cries with joy. When it ends in silence, you light herbs and sit by the child until it falls asleep. You say nothing. There is nothing to say, only time, and the pain becomes another scar on the heart. Once upon a time, long ago, you saved a man from a snake bite, or at least, you thought you did. You chewed a root, bandaged the wound, burned the edges with a hot stone, and gave him the bark to chew until he passed out. He lived, sort of. He limps now, and swears that snakes will recoil at the sight of him. You let him believe it. Historians still debate the origins of medicine. Was it knowledge passed down from mother to child, memorized through rhymes and stories? Was it trial and error, heavy on error? Or was it divine luck disguised as intuition? You never had to define it. You just knew if someone happened to walk into your cave with blood on their chest or panic in their eyes, you would do what needed to be done. That's what kept you ready. That's what kept them alive. The tools were simple: a sharp flint for cutting, a needle carved from bone, a bag of turpentine to seal the wound. Sometimes, all you have is fire and will. Sometimes, that's enough. And when it's not enough, you remember their name. You whisper their name when no one else is listening. You burn their favorite herb by the fire and trace a mark on a stone. You hold the pain in your throat like a stone that will never be swallowed. Tonight, you check on the sick child again. The rash is improving. The baby sleeps more deeply. The mother thanks you with her eyes, for the language is rare, and gratitude lives in the gesture. You put the herb in your bag, your hands dirty from the day's work, and stretch until you break a bone. Someone jokes that your medicine must come from the spirit. You smile and say nothing. Let them believe what they need to believe. The truth is less glamorous. You observe, you remember, you guess, and you hope. Tomorrow, another will come along, another cough, another scratch, another wound from the outside world, and you will be ready again, medicine bag in hand, fire crackling behind you. Because in your world, healing does not come with fanfare. It comes with silence, with breathing, with barking. Romance, has nothing to do with flowers, poetry, or moonlit walks. There were no love songs in the Paleolithic era, just grunts, glances, and the occasional well-aimed pebble. If someone shares firewood with you without asking, it's affection. If they give you a dry corner of their fur blanket, it's commitment. And if they bring you a decent piece of meat without bragging about it for 3 days, it's true love. Your lover starts things off in the usual way. One afternoon, while you're grinding roots by the stream, he comes up and hands you a shiny stone. Not a useful stone, not even a particularly symmetrical one, just a shiny stone. You nod, he nods, and that's it. You're a couple. The entire conversation lasts less than a minute, and there is no eye contact. That evening, he sits next to you by the fire without saying a word. You don't tell him to go away. That's the beginning. Some anthropologists believe that prehistoric mating rituals were surprisingly nuanced. Others think it was just proximity and convenience. You tend to agree with both. Sometimes you wonder if he chose you because you were the only one who didn't laugh when he didn't catch a fish, or maybe because you didn't throw rocks at him when he stepped on your rug. Either way, he stays. Love, here, is very practical. There are no "how was your day" questions. There are only "did you bring food" and "why is your foot bleeding" questions. It's not that the feelings don't exist. They just aren't expressed. They are understood in the way he instinctively picks up your basket when it gets too heavy, in the way you patch the hole in his coat without anyone asking, in the way neither of you mentions the time you both cried when your youngest won't wake up. You just hold each other and then go find more roots. Sometimes he brings you gifts, a piece of dried honeycomb, a feather, once a frog that was still alive. You take it all. Even the frog, you let it go when he's not looking. There are no anniversaries, no rituals, no hearts drawn on cave walls, just the general rhythm of survival going on. He sharpens his spear while you grind seeds. He sets traps, you reset them properly. He watches the kids while you dig for tubers. Sometimes he forgets, but every now and then he surprises you pulling a toddler out of danger just in time, handing you a piece of meat without warning, sitting next to you by the fire even when the others are noisier, more excited, more boastful about wild boars. Jealousy does exist in its quiet, prehistoric way. There's a woman in another family who always finds excuses to sit too close, the one who asks too many questions about where your mate is hunting today. You respond with a smile that could melt rocks and a story told out loud about how he once fell into a stream chasing a squirrel. She hasn't asked since. Sometimes, when you're alone, you wonder what he thinks of you. Does he see the soot on your face, the calluses on your hands? And think of strength. Does he notice the way your hair always smells like fire and shredded leaves? Probably not. But he notices when you're quiet for too long, when your shoulders are still tense even after dinner. He says nothing, just hands you a warm rock and sits nearby. That's his way. Historians aren't sure how monogamy worked in early human societies. Was it common, rare, transactional, emotional? You think the answer is yes. All of it. Love is rarely just one thing. Even now, back then, it was a mix of survival, comfort, convenience, and something softer that no one had yet been able to put into words. One night, when you couldn't sleep, he gave you a piece of bark with a spiral engraved on it. You didn't understand why. He didn't explain. He just looked at you and walked away. You've kept it ever since. There was no song, but sometimes, after the kids had collapsed and the fire had died down, you hummed, not to perform, just to remind yourself that you were still there. Sometimes he hummed too, horribly off-key. You didn't correct him. This wasn't romance as the modern mind imagined it. There was no poetry, unless you counted the rhythm of your shared footsteps, the wordless moments of passing the bowl, the way you could hand over a crying child mid-sentence and know that he would handle it without complaint. No flirting, just glances, no love letters, just carved stones, no grand declarations, just the constant choice, over and over again, to return to the same fire, to share the same space, to fall asleep with your backs turned but your feet touching. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the stars are bright and the cave is quiet, you reach out without looking and find his hand, and he holds it tight. Just once, then lets go. Just like that. The fire crackles. The children, sticky and finally silent, collapse into a pile of limbs and fur near the back of the cave. Your friend is dozing, his arm draped over his face, the last piece of squirrel meat still clutched in one hand like a trophy. You're done cleaning up almost. There's ash on your legs and something unidentifiable stuck to your elbow, but no one's bleeding, and nothing's burned. So the day has been, by every measurable standard, a success. This is when it happens. This is the moment when everyone exhausted, sore, still tasting of boiled bark gathers around the fire. Not because there's work to be done, not even because you want to, because this is how stories begin. You don't announce it, you don't clear your throat, you just start talking. Once upon a time, you say, a woman ran faster than a bear while she was 9 months pregnant. The children stir, eyes open, heads lift. She wasn't looking for the bear, but she was rooting. And there it was, right behind her. She didn't scream. She didn't run away. Not right away. She reached into her basket, grabbed the sharpest stick she could find. You pause for effect. And she threw it right into the bear's eye. The children gasp, the older ones feigning unimpressed, the younger ones utterly mesmerized. Storytelling in your world isn't just entertainment. It's memory. It's warning. It's magic that doesn't have to be real to be meaningful. Anthropologists often debate the role of oral tradition in prehistoric life. Some say stories are used to communicate survival strategies. Others say they are emotional tools, ways to bond, process, distract. You think they are? Because before there were books or songs or gods, there were stories told in the dark. You tell them about the great hunt where a man chased a mammoth straight off a cliff, only to climb down, only to realize it wasn't dead. About the spirit that lives on in the steam from boiled herbs, whispering secrets to those who would listen. About the woman who carved her name into stone with nothing but her fingernails and a will stronger than winter. Fires blaze, shadows dance, children lean in, eyes wide. This is their school, their comfort, their bedtime ritual. They will remember these stories not because they were written, but because you told them with your voice, your face, your whole being. Sometimes the stories are funny. Remember when Thog tried to impress that lady by wrestling a goat? Everyone laughed. He didn't realize it was a mother goat. The goat kicked him so hard that his left eyebrow never grew straight again. Even your spouse chuckled at that story. Sometimes, the stories are strange, mysterious. You talk about shadows moving in the corner of the cave, about dreams coming true, about birds carrying souls. You don't explain everything. You leave room for mystery, because not knowing everything is part of the human condition, even now. Sometimes you pause to let others add their own versions. A cousin corrects you. No, it was 2 goats. Another says the mammoth didn't fall, it slipped. The details change, but the facts remain. You were there. You lived. You saw. You remember? And as the fire begins to sink into the embers, the words slow down, the rhythm softens. The children fall asleep again. Even the eldest nods. His head resting on the stone pillows, you stop talking. The cave is silent. Outside, night has fallen. The stars twinkle in the trees, whispering in the darkness. Somewhere, a predator growls, distant but present. But inside the cave, there is warmth, breath, the smell of smoke, Fur was stew, life. You lean back, legs stretched out, arms crossed. Your partner moves to the side, feet touching yours. Nothing. Not necessary. You told stories. You lit the fire. You fed the children. You learned their names. You made it through another day in a world that doesn't care if you survive. But you did it. And you will do it again tomorrow. Now, close your eyes. Imagine the fire dying to warm, soft embers that pulse like a heartbeat. The cave is quiet. The air is cool and still. You lie on the fur rug, the baby's breath on your chest, the burden of survival gently lifted from your shoulders. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees, but inside, it is peaceful. You are safe. You are home. You are part of a long, unbroken stream of memories whispered in the firelight, carried in stories. Let the warmth envelop you. Let the silence embrace you and fall asleep.